Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Yellow Gloves podcast. Today we're going to be looking back at Cage Warriors 153 in Dublin, an absolutely insane card. So many finishes, so many emotional moments as well. I will say right off the top, I am a little bit under the weather today, so if I sound like shit, insert joke about me always sounding like shit, but if I do sound like shit today, that's probably because I'm a little under the weather. But the show must go on, and I really need to talk about this card. I need to get everything off my chest about this card because it was absolutely insane. I'm recording this Wednesday morning, so hopefully I can have it out around Wednesday afternoon. I don't want to waste any more time. We do have Cage Warriors 154 in Rome this weekend. There won't be a preview pod for it, only because I don't know who's going to put a lot of time to the side to listen to me twice in a week. So we will have a recap pod of that next week, but no preview pod for Cage Warriors Rome. But I'll do a little bit on the locker room fight towards the end of this episode if people are interested. So Cage Warriors 153. How about that for a card? Absolutely insane. We had 14 fights. We had 12 finishes. Loads of submissions, loads of knockouts, some huge underdog scalps in some of the fights. We had a massive comeback win. We had, like I said, an emotional main event. And like we always do with these episodes, let's just start right from the top. Let's go from Rhys McKee, Judo Jim, all the way down to Kyle McClurkin and Owen Williams. So in the main event, obviously, Cage Warriors 153, everyone's probably aware, Rhys McKee unified the 170-pound belt, the welterweight belt, against Judo Jim Wallhead. It was just an excellent performance from Rhys McKee. Like, genuinely a probably career best from him. I don't think Rhys has ever looked this good. But I mean, even before we get into the fight, Rhys's walking out to Zombie by the Cranberries. Obviously, yes, it's been done time and time again by Irish fighters walking out at the 3 Arena, blah, blah, blah. It was amazing. It was incredible. I thought the commentary, amazing job, just like not saying anything and letting the moment wash over the audience. It was genuinely beautiful. Rhys really took the moment in. He looked so confident walking out, and you just had a feeling that it would probably be Rhys's night the minute you saw that walkout. I think it was very obvious from round one how this fight was going to play out. Rhys McKee was jabbing early, kicking the calf, managing distance as you knew he would. But Jimmy was actually looping shots really well, closing the distance where possible. He kept circling around Rhys, like trying to find different angles and different ways that he could, get that left hook in. And Jimmy was landing a little bit in the first round, but McKee's jab was just glorious, just popping it with ease. It was an easy 10-9 first round for me for McKee. It was a competitive first round, and it's probably the most competitive that the fight was, because from the second round onwards, it was just one-way traffic for Rhys. But we need to talk about that jab really quickly, and I'm going to keep mentioning it as I go through the rounds. But I always talk about the jab in MMA. I think it's a bit tired and lazy to say that people don't jab in MMA as much. I feel like that's something we used to say maybe 7 or 8 years ago. We don't need to keep saying it. A lot of fighters jab now, but just because you're jabbing doesn't mean you're doing much with it other than just putting it out there. And what Rhys was doing was just absolutely spearing his jab through Rhys McKee, just targeting his head, and it was just beautiful, just quick, incisive, in and out, just glorious. And obviously using that range that he has, it was honestly one of the best jabbing performances I've seen in a while. It was so clean, and Judo Jim, who's a veteran of, oh my God, what is it, like 40, 45 fights? I think it's 45 actually. Just had no answer for the jab. Absolutely nothing. I think what struck me about this fight from a Judo Jim perspective, since we are talking about him, when he punched in combination, he was landing. And it's so much easier to say now, like, oh, maybe if he'd pushed the pace a bit more, maybe if he tried to just jab, double jab, and then get his way in and enter with like a left hook or something, perhaps he could have touched McKee. But I think when you need to punch in combination to land, doing it against a sniper like McKee is very, very risky, because the minute you commit to a 4 or 5 punch combination, nothing is stopping Rhys from either spearing at that jab through your second or third punch and absolutely stopping you in your tracks, or just lamping you with a right hook or something to put you out. And I think that's a reality that Judo Jim struggled to I don't know, to maneuver, but I think he struggled to find a balance between being smart and knowing he had to be aggressive, because fighting smart in this fight, I think, would have come through the grappling, and we'll talk about the grappling later. But on the feet, fighting smart against Rhys, I don't think would have ever won Jim any rounds, because Rhys is obviously an infinitely more refined striker and just has far better tools on the feet, has the range, has everything, has a diverse tools to draw from. I don't think that Jim could have won that striking battle. But when he was landing in combination, or when he was punching in combination in round two, he was landing. I like that they were both trading calf kicks. I think Jim was doing a great job kind of going to the well there with the calf kicks. In the second round, of like less than 90 seconds to go, they both cracked each other. It wasn't like no one got wobbled or anything, but you could tell that there was power going either way. The jab again from McKee was just stunning. At that point, from the second round onwards, like I said, you start to see McKee's jab add up, and you start to see him pull away. It really was a war of attrition. It really was just damage over time. In the first round, we were just like, oh, cool jab from Rhys. In the second round, we were like, oh, damn, Rhys's jab is insane. And then third and fourth, we're looking at what looked like a murder scene in the cage, right? And talking about that third round, Jimmy's left hook landed in that third round. I actually have gone to rewatch the fight because it didn't feel so competitive in my mind when the bell went and Rhys was celebrating. It felt like a comprehensive beat down from Rhys, and he was very dominant. But there were moments where Jim landed, and in the third round, you can go back and watch it. Lands a left hook. McKee kind of froze for just a split second when it landed, and then started going backwards. So there were opportunities there for Jim. Jim definitely had his moments, and that's why I don't think there should ever be from his side any kind of regret about this fight or things he could have done better or what he didn't do. I think there were moments for Jim where he managed to take the fight to this young fighter just fresh out of the UFC not too long ago, someone who's probably on their way back. So I think there's a lot of pride Jim can take from this fight. Third round, he did land that left hook. Go back and watch it. And he started to get the wrestling going, did Jimmy? But even though he picked McKee up with ease and took him down, and I thought that maybe this could be a path to victory for Judo Jim, and there was plenty of time to work when he did take him down. McKee just popped right back up really quickly, and from that moment you kind of knew, well, if the wrestling's not going to work for Jim, and he's not gotten him out of there, and we're halfway through the third round, now it's probably going to start to get ugly, and that's when it did start to get ugly. The calf kick from McKee was just crumbling Jimmy's pressure. McKee had him beat, man. Like distribution of damage to all areas of the body. We're talking the calf kick, we're talking shots to the body, and then just that jab over and over and over again to the face. By this point, Jim was just wearing a crimson mask going into the fourth round, and McKee started to really, really pull away. Like if we're talking about the fight was competitive, maybe up until halfway through round three, if I'm being generous, maybe the end of round two. Left hook to the body from Rhys McKee in round four was beautiful. The jab was doing all the work. I mean, there's not much, like a crazy amount to say. It was 40-36 McKee. I felt he'd won all four rounds going into the end of that round. And then obviously Judo Jim goes to his corner. I mean, he's bleeding, he's bruised, he's got cuts all over his face. It looked like he'd just been in a fight with a can opener or something like that. And again, how many of Rhys's opponents look like that by the time they're done fighting, right? We talk about this all the time, but Rhys really is he puts his damage on people over time. He's a late finisher of fights, which is always amazing to see. Like Mantekivi fight, I think went 3 rounds and then he got the finish. You had the Justin Burlinson fight, which went 3 rounds, got the finish, and then you had now Rhys McKee Judo Jim. That was 4 rounds. Well, yeah, 4 rounds because it ends in between rounds. So I still haven't quite gathered, and maybe this is lazy research on my end. I still haven't quite gathered who was in charge of stopping the fight. I know the cut man went over to Jim. I don't know if the cut man, because I think from the commentary it was sounded like the cut man was the one who made the decision to look. There's too many cuts on this guy's face. We probably can't proceed with the fight. I don't know if maybe there was a part of like a no mass moment from Judo Jim or from his corner, because it did feel like he was taking quite a beating. You saw Dan Hardy, really good moment where the camera pans to Tom Hardy in a replay, and he's like, motioning to his neck with his hand, and he's like, stop the fight kind of thing. So I don't know if that was a decision made by Judo Jim's team to kind of put an end to the fight, or if it really was that the cuts were getting into his eye and he couldn't proceed with the fight. I mean, either way, it's no smudge on Jim's career, and I just want to say that Cage Warriors did a phenomenal job putting the mic in these fighters' faces. We've been saying it for months and months and months. Bring back the fight interviews. You don't need to interview every single fighter, but at least the main event, especially in moments like this. I felt that Judo Jim was robbed of having his moment when he won the interim belt. Never got the mic, never got to talk to the crowd. I would have loved to have seen him talk to the crowd. That would have been a great moment. But he had his moment to address people. It was really emotional. His whole retirement. I mean, if you followed UK MMA for the longest time, or if you've been following the UFC for a long time, you know Judo Jim. Judo Jim's been about, and I think what's amazing about the Judo Gym stuff and why it was so emotional is a lot of guys don't get to retire like this. Like, how many people get to retire in a title fight where it was semi-competitive for a portion of the fight against a much younger fighter as the underdog? There's no real shame. He didn't go out there and get slumped. He didn't go out there and get absolutely embarrassed. He went and had a competitive fight with a younger fighter. And there are worse ways to go out. I hope that he stays retired. With MMA and all of that, like, when someone says they're going to retire, that probably means they're fighting next week. But I think with Judo Jim, I mean, he's got the gym that he has going on, no pun intended on his name. So I know that there's stuff there and there's loads of ventures there. He's probably going to live his career over and over again through all of his fighters that are coming up. So that's just one thing I wanted to say, like, right off the top. I think Judo Jim can hold his head high. It was a beautiful, beautiful career. Incredible way to end it. People don't end their careers in title fights. People don't end their careers as champions. And, yes, he's not ended it as a champion, but to go into your last fight with a belt, I think is really, really impressive and something he can be proud of. Retires 32-13, fought in Bellator, fought in the UFC, fought in Cage Warriors, fought in BAMMA, I think fought across the whole UK gamut as well. So massive shouts to Judo Jim. But I think the star of the show, I mean, it's easy to get caught in the emotions, but the star really was Rhys McKee. An insane performance, an insane striking performance. Like, genuinely such a special fighter as Rhys McKee. Still so young, so experienced. I think that was veering on his 20th pro fight. He's 27. He's been doing it for a while. And I think that like I said, I think that's a career best performance for Rhys McKee. He looked imperious. I mean, everything that he was throwing was landing. He looked quick. He looked sharp. He was moving really well in the cage, landing at ease, different diverse striking tools. He was patient. Didn't get engaged in a brawl with Judo Jim. We know Rhys McKee likes to brawl. We know that Jim does as well, but we didn't see Rhys force those entries or force that pace on Judo Jim. He knew what was on the line and he executed, and it was a brilliant, brilliant performance from Rhys McKee. Needs to be UFC bound, in my opinion. It's a Hardwick situation again. That we always talk about this stuff, right? Like, would I love to see Rhys McKee fight Fleminas, for example? Of course I would. Would I like to see Rhys McKee fight Oban Elliot? Of course I would. We'll get to the Oban Elliot fight shortly, but I want to see Rhys McKee back in the UFC. It's total unfinished business. To get cut the way he did, I said it on the pod in previous episodes, to get cut the way he did, losing a short notice fight to fucking Hamzat Chimaev, and then losing a competitive decision to Alex Morono, who Morono, at the time that they fought, Morono was a perennial, like, ranked fighter. Between both 155 and 170, he had shared time in both divisions, but at 170 he was looking good and he was on a streak. So there was no real layup for Rhys McKee. I want to see him back in the UFC with a full camp, with the experience and the confidence of winning a Cage Warriors belt, of stopping 3 opponents in a row. I think put him in there and let's see him thrive against really, really good competition and really competitive competition. Of course, like I said, do I want to see him against some of the Cage Warriors 170 guys? Of course I do. But I'd rather see him fight in the UFC, get his money and get his popularity, because he's a fighter that deserves it. He's a fighter that's been through a lot of shit. And what I always respect about Rhys is a lot of guys get cut from the UFC and then they don't quite bounce back. But Rhys just looks just like I don't know, just like re-energized as a fighter. Like he's just learned the biggest lesson of his life, and now he's ready to execute and make sure he doesn't make mistakes again. I'm really floored by McKee. I think when we talk about the end of year awards, if we're talking about performance of the year and stuff like that, I think Rhys McKee will be up there for performance of the year for me. Obviously, last year Paul Hughes won it for the Jordan Vucenic fight, but what McKee did to Wallhead, not a lot of people do. Even though Jim's at the tail end of his career, or clearly was at the last fight of his career, people don't really do that to Judo Jim. He's not had a career of people doing that to him. So really impressed with McKee. Just massive shout out to him and his team. I think they did an incredible job. Walkout was amazing. Arena was buzzing. And yeah, I mean, we've got a new proper unified welterweight champion. How long will he be champion for? I don't know. But let's keep chugging along around this card because we've got so much to talk about. We've got 14 fights to get through. All right, so co-main event was Tobias Harila versus Ryan Shelley, the people's main event, the fight we all expected to be absolutely bananas. And it wasn't really bananas. I mean, the finish certainly was, and the way that it came about certainly was. But I thought that both these fighters were fighting quite intelligently for what we're used to seeing from both of them. Obviously, a lot on the line in this fight. We're talking potential title contention for both guys. So I think that definitely played a part a little bit. Harila was pressure fighting early in round one, good calf kicks, and he was checking them too. People don't talk a lot about guys who check calf kicks really well, but Harila's one of them. Like he is going to fold his leg, he's going to check the kicks. It's brilliant how quickly he does it, and I think that needs to get shouted out a lot more against a really prolific kicker like Ryan Shelley. Shelley was striking really well off the back foot in round one, good teeps and front kicks and just strikes up the middle. I think halfway through round one, Shelley gets the takedown, and this is where the fight started to really veer in Shelley's favor. Had the backpack on Harila. Harila did shake him off, but by the time he shook him off, we had 30 seconds left of the fight, and Shelley had just spent like 2 minutes on Harila's back. So it was a round where not much damage could separate both fighters, and all of the grappling control was in Ryan Shelley's favor. So I scored that first round 10-9 to Ryan Shelley. Harila did, like I said, get up with like 30 seconds to go and was marching forward, and Harila's forward pressure in this fight was insane. I know he always fights like this, but talk about your pressure and your willingness to just march forward being a determining factor in how you win fights. Harila was just excellent in just surviving for as long as he did and then going through to that third round and doing what he did, and we'll get to that. Round two, beautiful hook to the body from Harila really early on, and a good flurry of strikes too. And it was similar to the sequence that ends the fight in round three. I've gone back and watched this one as well. Shelley was there to be hit, but Shelley did a great job at mitigating how many times he got hit, and he did that by getting the takedowns. So again, we had the backpack at this point. He had Harila's back, I think, with 3.5 minutes of the round. So a lot of time for Shelley to work. Harila, was his IQ on the ground great? Probably not. I mean, there's a moment where he kind of throws himself down, like giving up his back, on the ground. And at that moment, we saw that Shelley almost had the rear naked choke. It looked like it was right under the neck, and I thought Harila was going to tap, but come on, man. Why would Harila tap when he's literally, I don't know, like some demon from the underworld, right? Like this man has no sense of quit in him. The rear naked choke looked to be in. He kind of toughed it out a little bit. Shelley transitioned to a neck crank, face crank kind of thing, and Harila again toughed it out. And he didn't really show any signs of wanting to stop the fight or wanting to quit out of the fight. It was a brilliant round for Shelley, super dominant. And at this point, 10 minutes into the fight, we'd probably seen Shelley control proceedings on the ground for like around 6 to 7 minutes of the fight. So it was 2018 Shelley. Definitely Harila had his back against the wall. He needed to go and get a finish in the third round, and Shelley had to just see it out, more of the same. But what happens is Harila just starts marching him down and clubbing him where possible. It's just unbelievable. I think it's 1.5 minutes into round three. Harila just continuously pressing forward. Ryan Shelley's doing well to manage the distance until he isn't. The finishing sequence was beautiful. He does like a hammer fist right hand on the feet, which is, it looks like a hook, but it's not because it comes from like it really does have like a hammer fisty type motion, and puts the left hand behind it that completely wobbled Shelley. And then it's the knees that crumble Shelley. He goes in there, gets him in the clinch or collar tie, knees him, and then that's basically all she wrote. Tobias Harila, man, there's what else can we say about this guy? Like, it feels like a cliche at this point. Said it, and I'll say it again. If they hosted fights at the gates of hell, Tobias Harila would be there with his hands taped and his yellow gloves at the ready. This man is just an absolute demon in the cage. That forward pressure is nuts. It really is like Korean zombie-esque. It's unlike anything we're used to seeing in MMA. And I think for me, what makes Harila so appealing as a fighter is you'd think he's just some bonehead who's moving forward, but he's not. He's 12-3. He's just won a potential title eliminator. I know there's a lot of names at 145, but for me personally, this is a smart fighter who chooses to have his wits about him, but chooses to be a scrapper, chooses to be a butcher in the cage. And I think Shelley just got overwhelmed. It's one of those ones where it's like, why won't this man go away? Like, I've had him on the ground, I've had his neck, I've had his back, just break already. But Harila doesn't break ever. And that forward pressure really won him the fight. Beautiful finishing sequence. For me personally, I'd love to see Harila in a title match very soon. I know there's still things to iron out. Paul Hughes is saying that he might move up. So I don't know if they're saying that he's going to fight Hardwick or he's going to fight for a vacant lightweight belt when Hardwick gets signed to the UFC. Don't know exactly what's happening with featherweight, but I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing Harila in there in the next one, whether it's for a vacant strap or whether it is him versus Paul Hughes. I'd have a blast watching that fight, and I know a lot of people would as well. Just with Ryan Shelley, because I think we do this a lot when an undefeated fighter loses, we then move on from them and we forget how good they are. Ryan Shelley will definitely be back. He was great in this fight. He had a great game plan. He just got overwhelmed. This shit happens, like 6-0, very, very fresh into his career. Harila's had 16 fights, so the experience level was obviously weighing in Harila's favor. I think with Shelley, be patient with him. Someone who will probably be champ one day, someone who will probably go on to have a great career. This is just a bump in the road, and losing to someone like Harila is no bad smudge on your record. It really is just one of those like learning lessons for him, and I think Shelley will come out of this looking far better as a fighter. So moving on, we had Morgan Charriere versus Pedro Sousa, and it was a very, very interesting fight. We spoke about it in the preview pod. Charriere definitely an overwhelming favorite, but we knew that Sousa's good at one thing, and it's the grappling, and he's got some really like janky techniques, and once he gets your neck, he does not let go. And I thought there was a lot of risk in this for Morgan Charriere, short notice fight, because he was supposed to fight Coleman, and then Coleman pulled out, and Pedro Sousa stepped in. A really, really testy fight for Charriere, and he definitely went through fire to get the win in this one. Pedro Sousa had his back 40 seconds into the fight, just an insane start, was already isolating the arm and already trying to work Charriere's neck. He was actually hitting Charriere quite a bit on the ground, and Charriere wasn't moving. It didn't look like the ref was going to step in, but it's one of those moments where he could potentially start warning Charriere to move and everything. Like, the shots weren't heavy, but if you're not responding and you're turtling up, it's a bad visual, right? Charriere, I think, was being very, very careful against a submission whiz like Sousa. He was not moving too much on the ground. He was retaining a lot of position. He was doing his best not to leave his neck exposed or to leave an arm exposed. I thought while he looked not very mobile on the ground, I think it was very much a defensive tactic from him to just, okay, I've put myself in a bad position 30 seconds into the fight. I'm going to try and see this out till the second round and do my thing in the second round. And there were more moments. I mean, Sousa had the triangle position, just elbowing away at Charriere's head. And then in the very last minute of the round, Charriere finally pops out and elbows Sousa like really badly, gets a massive gash on his hairline, more elbows. And it was one of those from Charriere where he's landing the ground and pound, right? And you're seeing Sousa's head just cannon off the canvas, and you're hearing that thudding noise. You see his eyes roll into the back of his head. Charriere was hitting him with all of the frustration of being down the entire round, and it was just strike after strike after strike on the ground. I thought the referee was going to step in and stop it, but I think the frequency at which Charriere was landing towards the end of the round was not concussive enough to it didn't look so bad. It wasn't like he was landing strike after strike in quick succession, but when he was landing the elbows and the ground and pound, it was like thudding and like gross to watch back. Actually, if you go and watch back that sequence, you can see that Souza's like completely just rattled and completely out of it. So we presumably are going to head into the second round, and then out of nowhere the fight's completely waved off, and it made sense. I think Souza was definitely concussed or definitely struggling with something, or maybe had a moment where his team knew that there's nothing left for him in this fight. Charriere is losing 4 minutes of round one, and then in the last minute just produces a wicked comeback, wicked knockout finish. Obviously TKO, doctor stoppage, whatever, but it's for me something I'll remember for a while because Charriere isn't an incredibly prolific finisher of fights, or certainly hasn't been in recent memory. But I think people forget just how powerful this guy is. We spoke about his craftiness on the ground. I think he's a good defensive grappler. Got himself into some really shitty situations on the ground against a submission, again a submission whiz like Pedro Souza. And look at him. He didn't falter. He didn't get submitted. He had his back taken. He had his arm taken. He was in a triangle choke. He was getting elbowed in the head, and he survived. And I think sometimes people think that being a good defensive grappler means being flawless, being like, oh, Max Holloway never gets taken down, right? Like, of course, that's great. But there's also, you need to be a good defensive grappler when you are in bad positions. How are you reacting? Are you surviving those bad positions? Are you getting put into bad positions? So I think we also need to put some respect on these fighters who, even if they get into a bad position, are able to survive against people who are more like well versed on the ground than they are. So really impressed with Charriere. This fight was at catch weight, 150 pounds, but if Cage Warriors are going to do the Paris thing, wouldn't be surprised if. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we had like Harila versus Charriere for like the vacant belt, if Paul Hughes vacates and joins the UFC, right? Like that's a fight that wouldn't surprise me. I think you'd want to have Charriere in a title fight. Potentially, this is something that could push him there. Obviously, Souza doesn't have big name value, but again, if you're going to go to Paris, you're going to want to put a belt on the line in a Charriere fight. So I wonder if we're going to see that at some point this year. So moving on now, we had a incredible, the fight I was looking forward to the most, which was Oban Elliot and James Sheehan, an incredibly competitive fight between these two guys. I tweeted it the minute that they both walked out. This had like real like big fight feels. Like this felt like a really big fight with a lot of stakes. We know it was a title eliminator. No one has to say anything. We all know that the winner of this fight was going to step in and fight either Rhys or fight for the vacant belt. But it was for me personally. I picked Oban Elliot to win because I felt like he would go to the grappling well, and there would be like a chasm of quality between these two men, like just an absolute gap between them. And actually, yes, Oban went to the well, but there was a lot of striking, and it was a very, very competitive fight. In round one, I was very impressed by Elliot's willingness to engage with Sheehan. A lot of striking on the feet from both of them, right? Sheehan was also landing as well, and it felt like someone was going to get slept, especially because Oban Elliot still has this thing where when he's getting overwhelmed by strikers, he's always pulling his head back. It's not a good visual, and if Sheehan had struck in combination a lot more, he could have clocked Oban Elliot at the end of a combination, like if he had found a head kick behind his hands or something like that, with Oban Elliot pulling away the way that he does with his head. If you get caught disengaging like that, if you get caught moving away like that, it's gonna have drastic results for you, or dramatic results, so to speak. But I think Elliot did well to mitigate Sheehan's power. I think his boxing was really good on the night. He was quick in and out of the striking exchanges, And then with 2 minutes remaining of the first round, got the takedown really easily. I think there was an elbow in there that cut Sheehan up pretty badly. There was a lot of bleeding. Sheehan did manage to get back to the feet with around 20 seconds to go, I want to say. But from all the work that Elliot did on the feet, he landed more than Sheehan did. He was more effective with his striking, landed the more impactful shots, and then had a good 2 minutes of control on the ground. So I think from there we were starting to get an inkling of how this fight might go. Oban's going to play a bit on the feet and he's going to go for the grappling and secure the rounds that way. Round 2 was more of the same. Elliot entering and exiting, the striking exchanges really, really well. He looked super quick. The timing on the takedown was brilliant. I think Sheehan did a good job defensively. Like when he did go down from the takedown, he popped right back up in this round. Sheehan had a really nice calf kick, and I felt like he was warming up in this fight in the second round. He was starting to land a bit more, but then Elliot was given as good as he was getting, and then tied up the takedown with about a minute to go, and just controlled the fight until the end of the round. And again, I felt like Oban Elliot won that round. I had him up 20-18 going into the third round. It was a competitive fight, and I know a lot of people scored it 29-28 for Elliot, and I did see some scorecards 29-28 for Sheehan. I don't quite agree with those, but I don't disagree that Sheehan probably did sneak in a round in either 2 or 3. I don't disagree with it at all. Sheehan did push the pace early in round 3, and I think that's where people felt like he might have won the round. But Elliot's jab was there for me to dissuade that pressure. Elliot had a good takedown as well off a really lazy calf kick from Sheehan with 3 minutes to go. And then it was elbow after elbow on the ground, striking so well within the ground was Elliot. It felt like I was watching Mark Coleman back in the day. Like he was really comfortable striking in Sheehan's guard and just letting off ground and pound where possible. It wasn't flustering Sheehan at all, but he was landing. One of the moments that Sheehan will probably rue is that close towards the end of the third round, he does land a really good shot on Oban Elliot as Elliot was pulling his head back, like we just spoke about. It's a bad visual, and it doesn't fill you with much confidence when you see a fighter do that. But Sheehan didn't really, at that point, I think he'd already been a little bit kind of broken and wilted down that he couldn't put much else on Elliot. I personally scored it 30-27 Elliot, and for me, he feels utterly inevitable at 170 pounds. Very much feels like strap season for him. I would love to see him go in there and fight for the belt, whether it's against Rhys or whether it's vacated. Sheehan, props to him. He's going to be back. He's a heavy-handed individual, someone who knows how to finish fights. He went a hard 15 of Oban Elliot, potentially won a round in there, snuck around in there. So it wasn't a total blowout from Elliot. But I think it really felt like one of these fighters knew how close the opportunity was to be in title contention, and also to make that big step as soon in their careers into the UFC. It felt like one of these fighters really knew that and really felt that and fought like very smartly. And that was Oban Elliot, of course. And I think Sheehan just fought like he always fights. And, why not always do what got you to the dance, right? That's always the thing that we talk about in MMA. Like, don't change things up because suddenly things could look better for you, or you've got a good opportunity on the way. But I think the way that Oban Elliot is predisposed to fight, he's a lot smarter and he's a lot more risk averse if he has to be. And I think with this fight, he did a great job on the feet, and then just on the ground, it was obviously a different quality between the two fighters. So Oban Elliot, props to him, really impressive with that performance. I think you put him in a title match, wouldn't be surprised if he just ran away with the belt at some point in the future, and we will probably see him in the UFC very soon. So now our massive streak of finishes begins, right, as we work our way down the card. Opening up the main card was Deki Makalinen versus Wasi Adesina. I spoke about this fight. I was like, someone's definitely going to get knocked out or something like that. Wasi, very, very strong, 155. A bit not the tallest guy for the division, but just powerful and very, very strongly built individual. And Deki Makalinen, we've been watching Makalinen for years, right? It's kill or be killed with this guy, and it's evidenced by his record. And I had a feeling that this one wasn't going to go very long, and I thought it would end in the first round. But the way that it ended for me was just insane. Obviously, in Deki Makalinen's favour, Adesina in early in round one actually gets a takedown nice and early, but Makalinen immediately threatened the triangle. And I think at that moment, it probably should have been a warning sign for Adesina that Deki is very dangerous off his back, like extremely dangerous, doesn't get enough credit for it. And I think he tried to power through. He was active in the side control, had elbows in the head, and was trying to post up. So he was doing good stuff on the ground with Adesina, but Makalinen then threatened the armbar, right? Adesina continued to play with him on the ground, continued to have active, showing active striking and showing that he was trying to work Makalinen on the ground. And then with seconds left on the clock, Deki Makalinen just builds his way into an armbar. Beautiful, just cranks on that arm with seconds left on the clock. I think there was 6 seconds left on the clock. Just so smooth, such an unbelievable armbar. And we had another insane armbar on this card that we'll talk about later. But this is just pure Deki Makalinen. Like you will never see a more Deki Makalinen fight ever. I think Adesina will be kicking himself for going to the ground with Deki. I don't know if they backed him and his team backed their grappling prowess over Makalinen's or thought that they could control it, but Makalinen's always been just an absolute fucking Tasmanian devil off his back. And it's no surprise to me, even though I think Makalinen might have been the underdog going into this fight. I think he very much proved that he should never be counted out in a cage, and he's always got that finishing instinct. And Wasi Adesina just got taught a lesson. I hope we see Adesina again though in the yellow gloves. He's someone who definitely has potential, someone who definitely is going to seek a finish every time he goes out there. But Deki Makalinen, props to him, a great way to open up the card with an Irish fighter, or open up the main card, sorry, with an Irish fighter, getting the finish. And it was at that point, I think it had been like 7 or 8 finishes in a row, maybe even 9 finishes in a row that we had. And it was just so much fun to watch. So Deki Makalinen, props to him. I think he's now 8-5 as a pro, definitely climbing up. Good to see him back in action. Good to see him back in the win column. And I hope he gets booked again soon because he didn't take too much damage and the fight got done pretty quickly. So again, very hyped about Makalinen's return there. And so we had the prelim headliner, or the featured prelim, as they call it in the UFC, between Benoit Blanc and Taka Mandu. This was kind of sad because there was a lot of hype around Taka Mandu going into this fight. I mean, we spoke about it on the pod. We gave Benoit Blanc his flowers, obviously, and we know that Blanc is a talented fighter, but someone who was definitely moving up into bantamweight from flyweight. And I felt that Taka Mandu, he's quick, he's got the crowd behind him. One hell of a story that he's been on. Like his career is just insane. Like I said, if you've not read the piece in the Irish Mirror about everything he's gone through in his life, then definitely seek that out. And this one was sad because you expected Taka Mandu to go in there, put on a show in front of the Irish crowd. Blanc, by the way, obviously no mug, absolutely not. And I thought this was going to be a very competitive fight. I felt like there would be a finish in there, and obviously we had one, but I thought it would definitely be a more drawn out fight. And Taka Mandu looked massive in there, which was no surprise to me. Obviously, Benoit Blanc moving up from flyweight, but Taka Mandu was bouncing really well on the feet, looked really confident, landed a really nice left hand as Benoit Blanc dipped in. But Blanc was looking for that takedown. That's all he wanted, and he got it halfway through the round. I'd say took Taka Mandu down and took his back and his neck. So he had Taka Mandu in an awful position. And this is where we had a bit of controversy on this card, or a bit of weirdness and things that I certainly haven't seen in a while. Taka Mandu definitely taps. Go back and watch it. Like I know that people, I think the replays that they showed were garbage because I don't think it really, I think you get the best visual of it when you're watching the fight live. So go back and watch it because Taka Mandu definitely taps. Like it's not just like a one tap, it's like a 2 or 3 tap. Like I'm tapping on my arm right now and you can't see it, but he taps. And I think the referee might have been Leon Roberts. I can't quite remember because I'm lazy and I can't be asked to go back and watch it again, but I think it's Leon Roberts, and he stops the fight. And at that point it's like, wow, Benoit Blanc just just steamrolled Takamandu, just got him down and took his neck and subbed him. Benoit Blanc is celebrating. Takamandu's like protesting, and Leon Roberts, you hear Leon Roberts say, "Oh, I thought you tapped," and then he continues with the fight. Which I haven't seen in a while. Like I can't remember the last time a referee stopped a fight because he thinks he saw a tap, doesn't stick to his decision because of the fighter's protest, resets the position. So, and obviously that's fair to Benoit Blanc, and the position should be reset, but like they reset with Benoit Blanc's arm under Takamandu's head, right? So, or under his neck, sorry. So it's just a very, very weird visual. I don't know what was going on there, but Benoit Blanc's just a dog. He gets back into that rear naked choke. Takamandu survives it, and then not long after, he manages to work his way back to his feet. Does Takamandu calf kicks? The crowd's roaring. Just he's got the hype behind him now, and then Benoit Blanc just zaps all of that energy out of the crowd, takes Takamandu down, gets in the DAS position, and then truly forces Takamandu to tap. There's total silence in the crowd. Beautiful submission. My man got 2 submissions in one night. How insane is that? Like he literally tapped Takamandu twice. Don't care what anyone says. Uh, Nothing but love and respect for Takamandu, and I know he will be back, and he's gonna go on and still have an awesome career. He's 2-2, but not all careers start in a perfect manner, and you have to learn along the way. But I think he just bit off more than he could chew with Benoit Blanc, and the defensive grappling was just not there for him. Benoit Blanc, props to him, someone to definitely continue to keep an eye on here. At maybe 135 pounds, maybe he moves down to 125 pounds. 6-2, prolific finisher of fights. Really, really fun fighter. Great DAS choke. And yeah, just someone that folks should definitely continue to observe, because he could be something special at either weight class. We're just going to rattle through some of these finishes because a lot of the fights that we're going to talk about now did not last too long. So we had Angus Hewitt versus Paddy McCorry. Paddy McCorry is the fucking future. Like, you watch this guy fight, and there is an aura about him. There is something that isn't tangible, something that there's just a quality about him that I can't quantify at the moment. And sometimes you just get that feeling with a fighter, like the way he celebrated, like sparking up the zoot, like as he knocks out Angus Hewitt was awesome. Like I loved that celebration. He looks confident. And the finishing sequence was unbelievable. I mean, we're talking 2 minutes into the very first round. Angus Hewitt debuting as a pro. Paddy McCorry, obviously 2-1. Competitive fight with James Webb in his Cage Warriors debut on very short notice. And right off the bat, he has like this insane flying knee to start the fight. After some tentative striking from both guys, like feeling each other out, flying knee lands, and not long after, we'd see the flying knee again as he rocks Angus Hewitt with a beautiful head kick and then smokes him with a flying knee finish. It's just a stunning knockout finish. I've got a list of the best finishes of the year. I'm already tracking it so that when I come to do my end of year awards, the Yellow Glove Awards, I know exactly what to go back and watch. And the first thing I did after Paddy McCorry landed that flying knee is I went onto my notes app and I just jotted that one down in there along with the Jonata Silva finish and the Dimitri Gerlin finish over Adam Cullen. It's right up there for me. Just a gorgeous flying knee, so well timed, like well placed flying knee. This guy's the future at 3-1. Folks, you need to keep an eye on this guy because I think he's very much going to be a problem at 185 pounds. He's big for the weight class. He's powerful. He's a smart individual, smart fighter in the cage. Paddy McCorry's the future. Don't have much else to say because the fight didn't go too long. Cannot wait to see him in action again. And the submissions just kept rolling and rolling in for the rest of this card. We had Adam Darby versus Jack Tucker. I, by the way, would like to apologize to Jack Tucker for cursing him because I tweeted just before, like literally just before the fight started. I said, I told people to keep an eye on Jack Tucker's grappling because his grappling is really good. He's a really good grappler. And Tucker, to no surprise, went in there nice and early, secured the takedown 90 seconds in. And I was sat there like, yeah, Jack Tucker's a really, really good grappler. I've been telling people that this guy is someone to keep an eye on at 1-0 against Adam Darby. And yeah, not long after, Adam Darby, triangle off his back, gets a submission. Beautifully done. the minute the fight hit the mat, Darby was actively seeking the finish. Like Jack Tucker was trying to control it, but Darby was active off his back, elbowing off his back, and looking for an armbar, looking for a triangle, and he gets the triangle choke halfway through the very first round. Props to Adam Darby. By no means did I mean to say that Jack Tucker was going to outgrapple him or destroy him, but I knew that Tucker's, like, his method of victory was always going to be via the grappling, but for Darby to basically say cool bet and then submit Jack Tucker halfway through the first round, props to Adam Darby, because that was really, really impressive. We then had Leon Hill versus Marcin Zembala. That's one of the fights that I told people to keep close eye on from the prelims. That one and the Leblond Curtis fight, which we'll get to. Leon Hill is a very, very highly touted 4-1 prospect, now 5-1. Irish fighter, had some concussion issues early in his career, took a lot of time off. Last year had 4 fights as a pro, won all of them, and then he's come into Cage Warriors now. He's returned to Cage Warriors after all that time out against a veteran like Marcin Zembala. And I told people, don't sleep on Zembala. Yes, he's 7-6, but he's on a 3-fight win streak. He's a veteran. He's the most experienced fighter that Leon Hill has fought. And Leon Hill did not give Zembala that respect at all, because he just smoked Marcin Zembala. There was the clinching against the fence, which Hill dominated that position early in the first round, got the fight to the ground and inside control 2 minutes in. He was doing really, really good work inside control, like striking to the body, had one arm pinning down the neck and the head. So he was doing a lot of really good work and just totally dominant. Great elbows and ground and pound towards the end of the round. I think 10-9 Hill, extremely dominant, not enough damage to swing a 10-8, but it was a very, very dominant round from him. And then second round, Leon Hill was switching stances really well, like early on, something that he does quite regularly. So it's not like we've never seen it before, but it was nice to see that stance switching. Zembala did catch him with a nice right hand while Hill was landing a head kick himself. So they caught each other in a flurry of strikes, and the fight again returned to the fence. I think at this point, Zembala tried to get the arm in guillotine as Hill took him down, but Hill just found his way to side control, defended the choke really well, and then he had 2.5 minutes to work from side control. And work he did, because he transitioned to mount, started pounding the head with elbows and strikes. Zembala gave up his back. Leon Hill tried to go for the rear naked choke. And then it was more elbows, more strikes from the body triangle and in back mount. Like, he had back mount, and then he was also locking in a body triangle. It was just a clinical and incisive one-sided beatdown from Leon Hill. Good stoppage by the ref, because it's just one of those where Zembala had nowhere to go. He was in a body triangle. He had his back taken. It was just strike after strike. He had nothing for Leon Hill. Just a superb performance, because I honestly mean this, Zembala is not an easy guy to put out. I know he's lost 7 times. He is 7-7, but if you watch the man fight, it's not an easy feat putting him out of there and dominating him like Leon Hill did. So again, you want to keep an eye on someone, Leon Hill's one of those guys to keep an eye on. Solomon Simon and Dorian Kliuchnikov was the next fight. Solomon Simon 1-0 going into this fight. Again, highly touted prospect in Ireland. And Kliuchnikov, a guy we'd seen in Cage Warriors before, quite a chinny fighter. And we did obviously see that perspire throughout the fight, I guess. Solomon Hill got the finish late into the second round. It was a lot of stalking pressure from Solomon Simon going into this fight. He was beating up the lead leg of Kliuchnikov, like a beautiful destruction of that lead leg. It was loads of calf kicks early into the first round. He built up all of that good work. And then in the second round, it was more pressure and from Solomon Simon, more walking him down, drops Kliuchnikov with the calf kick. And as Kliuchnikov's trying to get back to his feet, he kicks Kliuchnikov's calf again, which was just, I mean, I love shit like that. It was brilliant. Reminded me of the brutality of the old Pride days. It was really nice to see. But Solomon Simon at that point, he knew he had the leg compromised, so he started to open up with the hands. He's such a fast striker. You didn't see enough of it in this fight, but he is so quick with the hands, especially in small windows that he's throwing them in. It's just beautiful to see. And Simon continued to stalk him and just kept punishing Kliuchinikov's mistakes. As opposed to letting his hands fly, if Kliuchinikov had a little gap in his defense, then Solomon Simon was there to pop him with a jab or pop him with a hook. Eventually took Kliuchinikov down late into the round, trapped a hand underneath Kliuchinikov, landed strike after strike after strike in back mount, and then ref stopped in. Good stoppage, because he would have just kept pounding in Kliuchinikov's head anyways. I know Kliuchinikov did protest it, but it's hard to... I understand why fighters protest it. There's a lot of pride and there's a lot of preparation that goes into a fight, but if you've got your back taken and you're getting hit and you're not recovering or you're not moving, then the referee has to protect you because you're not protecting yourself. So good stoppage there. Solomon Simon's 2-0 now. Another guy to keep an eye on. Really fun prospect at 145 pounds. Fast hands. And I can't wait to see him in there again. All right, we're gonna try and go through. I always say we're gonna try and rattle through these fights, and in my head I'm like, I'm gonna talk about the next 4 fights in like 2 minutes, and then I just get caught up in the little details of fights because that's what I enjoy watching fights for. So I am gonna try and go through these fights really quickly, but probably won't. Adam Shelley versus Mohamed Kiramet. It was exactly what I expected. Mohamed Kiramet, I'd never seen him fight. Short notice. He's 2-4. Adam Shelley, highly rated Taekwondo expert, great kicker, and we saw him just unload like he basically, like, when you played Street Fighter or Tekken back in the day and you're looking at all the moves for the characters, his move list was basically completely just like depleted in this fight. Like, he did all of his moves. He had this special finisher move. He had all of everything, right? He had his fatality in there and all of that. It was insane. Just a great striking display from Adam Shelley. Hit Mohamed Kiramet with so much. I mean, we had hook kicks, question mark kicks, side kicks to the body, spinning hook kicks, spinning back kicks. And what does he finish him with? He finishes him with a tornado kick, right? Like, he goes like fucking 360 tornado kick, insanity on Mohamed Kiramet. There was a little bit of controversy around the stoppage, but I'm sorry, man. Like, Kiramet was getting beaten from pillar to post, and when Shelley landed that tornado kick, he's a Taekwondo guy. Like, as a ref, you need to know what you're reffing. You need to know who you're reffing, and you know that if he lands a tornado kick, even if it lands partially, it's gonna be more impactful than another rando fucking fighter doing it. Like, this is a Taekwondo specialist who's landing a seriously impactful shot on a guy who's getting beaten up. Like, seriously, Mohamed Kiramet had nothing for Adam Shelley. No disrespect to Kiramet, but Adam Shelley, was great to see him get a finish, because I did criticize the Ndai fight because I knew he could have pushed and he could have gotten that finish. Gets it here. Just a brilliant array of strikes. Go back and watch it. Like, if you love kicking and if you love fighters that have like a nice kind of karate, Taekwondo type of blend in their game, go watch Adam Shelley, Mohamed Kiramet, because it was like target practice for him. Genuinely such an awesome fight. It was at 160 pounds. I'm looking forward to seeing Shelley at his original weight, 6'3" lightweight that he is. Want to see him in there again. Want to see more of this beautiful, like, just diverse striking arsenal that he has, because it's for me, it's an absolute joy to watch. Then we had Nicolas Leblond versus Ryan Curtis. This was my kind of sleeper pick of the night. I tried telling as many people as I could, this is the fight that you have to watch. Like, this is the fight that, people talk about Harila as Shelley, as they should do. People are talking about Sheehan and Oban Elliot, and people talk about the main event and everything. But this was, for me, like the fight of the night going into it for the prelims, right? So Nicolas Leblond, Ryan Curtis, both flyweights. Curtis, just a kill or be killed kind of guy. Leblond, a prolific finisher at 125 pounds. Like, genuinely, it's, for me, as you guys know, it's my favorite weight class. Well, like, across the world, I love flyweight. But you sometimes, yes, you get finishers, and whenever you say there aren't many finishers at 125 pounds, people will be like, well, have you ever seen Davis and Figueiredo? And yes, I have. But if you've watched flyweights around the world, you know that by and large, it's still not a weight class that finishes very often, right? Like, in the UFC, we see it, and that's fine. But I mean, like, worldwide, it's not a weight class that is generating a ton of finishes. But Nicolas Leblond is a guy that is just going out there and beating people and getting finishes, and so is Ryan Curtis. Curtis did lose this fight, which was really, really disappointing, because I had a lot of high hopes for him. But he will be back. I hope he gets another opportunity in Cage Warriors, because he definitely deserves it. It's just one of those fights where Leblond just came out just on smoke. beautiful trip takedown, and then had a mat return in there. Just was just beautiful. Curtis was doing good things on the feet actually early until that point, but again, once Leblond got him down, Curtis was unable to break the grappling. Right, like it was all Leblond. I've done as much research as I could here. Like I actually broke the mold of being just a typically lazy person, and I couldn't find that there's ever been a bulldog choke in Cage Warriors. I've been watching Cage Warriors for a long time, so both from my recollection, I feel like I'd remember one, but then also from the research I did, I couldn't find one. So Nicolas Leblond, first ever bulldog choke in Cage Warriors history. It was actually gross to watch. Like we've all seen the Miletich, Carlos Newton, like we've seen bulldog chokes in the cage before, but like the way that he had Curtis's neck and the way he was circling around and just like cranking on it and just lifting the neck, it was genuinely like, if you go back and watch it, it's actually nasty, and it makes you realize, like, what am I actually watching here, and why am I enjoying it as well. But Nicolas Leblond, just an insane bulldog choke. Curtis did well to battle it for as long as he did, but eventually just choked utterly unconscious, right, by Leblond. Just a terrific performance from Nicolas Leblond. Can't wait to see him in there again. Already up there for finish of the year for me. Like, it's already in my list alongside the Paddy McCorry one. So that's something that we'll probably talk about at the end of the year. So last two fights of the card. We'll start with Alexander O'Sullivan and Ephraim Taki. So Alexander O'Sullivan, a guy that I gave a lot of props to on this pod, someone that I am familiar with from the IMAF scene, from the amateur scene. 1-0 as a pro going into this fight, 30 amateur fights at the age of 24. Yes, you heard that right. That's exactly what Alexander O'Sullivan's been doing with his life. He's just been scrapping this whole time. And they said it on the broadcast. Brad Wharton said it on the broadcast. He mentioned that they say that there's around 10 fights that are unaccounted for in his record as well as an amateur. So you're probably looking at a 40 fight pro, or not a 40 fight pro, but like a guy with 40 fights under his belt as an amateur at the age of 24. That's pretty insane. And it's why I say, don't always look at records and assume someone's just a total noob or they're new to the scene of MMA. This guy's been fighting for so long. And Ephraim Taki, again, very respectable fighter, making his pro debut here, and a great kind of amateur background as well. Cut his teeth in the IMAF scene too. So Ephraim Taki, no joke, shoots for the takedown early on O'Sullivan, threatened a choke. You know, Taki looked comfortable on top for like the first few seconds. And then O'Sullivan started cutting angles with the open guard, put his arm under the leg, transitioned to the arm bar with insane speed. Hard to describe it, honestly. Like, I don't think anyone can do it justice. So all I'll say is go on Fight Pass or go on YouTube and try and seek this finish out. I posted it as well on Twitter, Yellow Gloves Pod on Twitter. Go and see it, because it's just a rapid transition into the arm bar. Just absolutely stunning. One of the best arm bars I've seen in a while. The setup is insane. Alexander O'Sullivan's 2-0 now. I'm very, very excited to see how his career goes, because he's got a ton of experience for someone who on paper is going to be matched up with people of a similar record. He fought Ephraim Taki. There was just one pro fight between them going into this, and he looked like just a seasoned veteran in there. So Alexander O'Sullivan, keep an eye on this guy. I know I keep saying that. There's a lot of prospects on this card. Alexander O'Sullivan's definitely someone you want to kind of follow for the rest of his career, because he could do some really, really special things. With the Kyle McClurkin and Owen Williams fight, not a crazy amount to say about this, except for the fact that I'm really, really happy for McClurkin. We hadn't seen him in a few years. Last time we saw him, he got highlight reel blasted by Christian Leroy Duncan. Again, no shame in that, because Christian Leroy Duncan is now a UFC fighter, former middleweight champion at the Cage Warriors level. So Kyle McClurkin went in here against Owen Williams. Owen Williams falls to 0-3. Probably, I don't know that we'll see him in the yellow gloves again, purely because he has been just dominated from bell to bell in all of his fights under the Cage Warriors banner. McClurkin was brilliant. He was patient. Really good right hand early that cut Williams up. Williams was telegraphing his shots, and McClurkin was moving really well. You could tell that he was wary of Williams's kind of janky striking style and janky winging hooks and stuff like that. But McClurkin managed that really, really well. Had the rear naked choke attempt a couple of times. Argument for a 10-8 in the second round. Owen Williams has no neck because I don't know how this man was not submitted in that second round. Kyle McClurkin almost had him out of there. Beautiful body lock takedown from McClurkin in round 2 has to be mentioned as well. I personally scored it 30-27 McClurkin. I didn't feel like there was enough of a damage, uh, enough damage done from his end to warrant a 10-8 in round 2. So I personally scored it 30-27, but I know that a couple of judges had it 30-26, and a lot of people covering the card and talking about the card did too. So props to McClurkin, back in the win column, very dominant performance, and he's someone who is going to continue to perform under the Cage Warriors banner, who's going to go in there, hammer and tongs. It was nice to see him fight patiently and fight smartly here, but knowing the way that he fights, knowing how heavy-handed he is, and knowing that he didn't get the finish here, in the next one, he's probably going to have that itch and he's going to go in there and just scrap with someone. So definitely keep an eye out on future Kyle McClurkin fights, because I'm sure that they will not go the distance like this one did. So that puts a bow on my Cage Warriors 153 recap podcast. It was an incredible card. I mean, would we have liked to have seen Kalen Loughran on this card? Would we have liked to have seen Paul Hughes on this card? Yes. I know Graham Boylan mentioned that Paul Hughes had an injury, which is why he couldn't take the fight on this card, and it was offered to him. Paul Hughes is now talking about moving up. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. But by and large, I mean, when you have a card with 14 fights, 12 of them end as a finish, you've got controversy in the Takamandu. Did he tap? Did he not tap? You've got the emotion of an amazing retirement from Judo Jim. You've got the crowning of this incredible talent in Rhys McKee. You've got comeback wins aplenty from Morgan Charriere and Tobias Harila as well. You've got star-making performance in a guy like Oban Elliot. And then you've got the future just bubbling, right? Just bubbling to the surface in Paddy McCorry and someone like Solomon Simon, for example, Alexander O'Sullivan as well. So it was a brilliant card. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I think they just smashed it out the park. It was genuinely impressive. I know they didn't sell out the 3 Arena, but either way, it looked like a really good vibe, looked like a great atmosphere, and the fighters just looked like they were kind of feeling that energy from the crowd, and it definitely showed because of all the finishes that we saw. I just want to call out again, Cage Warriors 154 Rome is this weekend. So many awesome fights on this card. You have Dylan Hazan, Kalen Loughran for the strap. Leon Aliu, Darren Stewart's going to be great. Sam Creasy's back against Lupoli. You've also got Jasmine Favero, who has fought under the Cage Warriors banner before. Be great to see her again. Dario Belandi, Daniel Carlson's going to be a scrap. Milton Alfonso Cabral, someone to keep an eye on, Portuguese fighter who's just been signed by Cage Warriors after an unbelievable knockout. He's definitely someone you're going to want to watch. Gerardo Fanny's back under the Cage Warriors banner against Tanio Pagliarico, who I really highly rate. A lot of awesome fights on this card. I won't have the opportunity to preview it, but what I will say is that main event is going to be brilliant. I'm very excited to see how Kalen Loughran gets on in this massive moment for him, because I think he's the next one up. I feel like he's probably a win or two away from getting snapped up by the UFC, because he just feels inevitable. You know, I don't want to give him the yellow gloves curse like I did with old Jack Tucker on the prelims of this Dublin card, but Kalen Loughran, for me, I would back him in a lot of matchups in the UFC against like perennially ranked 135ers, like guys in the top 25, top 30. I would back Loughran to beat a lot of those fighters. I really would. So, you know, not to discredit Hazan, but I think that Kalen Loughran very much feels inevitable at 135 pounds, and I cannot wait to see how that fight unfolds. So that's I guess the end of this recap pod. Couple things I want to ask you folks to do if you're still listening. One, tweet me. What was your favorite fight on this card? Who impressed you the most? Just anything. Let's chat about this card, because there's so much still to talk about. And if you've got any questions about, you know, you want to talk about the upcoming fight in Rome, please just shout me on Twitter, Yellow Gloves Pod, Instagram, Yellow Gloves Pod. I'm always happy to chat. And if you're still listening to the pod, please leave a rating or leave a comment or some sort of subscription or anything like that. If you're on YouTube, or a like or something like that, anything to kind of boost the pod. I want to reach as many people as possible to discuss Cage Warriors and kind of push this podcast far and wide, because I really enjoy doing this as a passion project, and I think that a lot of people get a lot out of listening to me just rant and rave about the fights under this promotion. So definitely help your boy out, give him some push, because that would be awesome. And yeah, I guess I will see you with a recap pod next week of the Cage Warriors 154 card in Rome. Keep it easy, guys, and I will catch you on the next one.